Hello and welcome to Season 9, Episode 2 of the Data Governance Podcast. And this week is the first in this season of my interviews. And I'm talking to the amazing Vipul Parmar, who is the Global Head of Data Management for WPP. Now, I first came across him only a couple of months ago when he was presenting a virtual event I went to. And I just loved the passion with which he spoke and also how he made the concept really easy to get your head around, and I just knew I had to invite him on the podcast. So let's dive in and hear what Vip has to say. So welcome, Vip.
Thank you, Nicola, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
Excellent. Oh, you're very welcome. So to let my listeners know a little bit about you, you're a highly experienced data management professional with a diverse, proven track record. And you're a pioneer in leveraging AI to unlock data-driven innovation. I think, from what I heard at your previous presentation, it's very clear you've got a very sharp analytical mind and very good at creative problem solving skills. And I think even in the conversations we've had in the prep for this, but I think, your whole way of thinking and everything is that you are all about the things that I talk about aligning what you're doing with data governance with strategy. But you're now talking about aligning strategic objectives and optimal outcomes using the innovative application of data and AI. So it's exciting times to be doing what we're doing. And you seem to be working right at the forefront of that data and AI, which is really exciting. So I have prepared a few questions for you. But obviously, one thing I do like to ask people when they're on my podcast is the one thing, is some of us, or many of us, get into data governance by accident. So I'm always interested to learn, how long have you been working in data governance? And most importantly, how did you actually get into it?
Oh, well, safe to say, my career journey and my pathway into data governance was also by accident. So, I didn't kind of wake up one day saying, hey, this is data governance is the thing that I want to do, right? And that's the path that I want to take. Well, in fact, it's kind of, the way in which I got into data was by accident. Many years ago, I was in the world of telecoms and I was managing provisioning for a telco, so giving people their broadband, their telephony services and their TV services. And what I found was that a lot of the discontent amongst our customers, where's my order, where's my broadband, where's my modem, all of that kind of stuff. All of those could be proactively solved just by using the data, right? The answers are in the data. Things go wrong, well, we can then figure that out just by reconciling the data. So that's kind of how I then kind of got into it, by understanding and realizing that data can kind of help, provide the answers and solve a lot of problems as well. But then what then that kind of then naturally led me into the world of data quality management, right? Why do we have problems? For example, when system A doesn't talk to system B, we can then figure that out by just reconciling the data, right? That's simple. Data quality, that's around looking at the consistency of our data, for example. So kind of got into the world of data quality management through that as well. Worked on some mergers and acquisitions where we had to do a lot of data cleansing in order to complete data migrations of customer bases over from old system to new system and whatnot. And then I kind of really got submerged myself into the world of data governance kind of around mid 2016, early 2017, back in the days where we were we learned about this thing called GDPR that was going to happen May 2018. We're all kind of like scratching our heads. What does it mean? What do we need to do? How do we need to prepare ourselves? So, back then, my team and I talked. We we're figuring out, well, what do we need to have in place, right? What foundations do we currently already have? Because we already had a whole bunch of data governance processes and policies and things in place. But then, what do we need to do to kind of bring us into the new modern world of data privacy? So, we then kind of focused on how do we bring the right tools in place to make sure that we can manage data governance and run that smoothly. So that's kind of like how it happened. So it's kind of an organic, got into data. It was all about, well, we've got some problems, data quality, and then it's like, well, it's kind of like, data governance is the big umbrella that it will kind of sits under. And then I think also not all of my roles since then have been specifically around data governance, but having a mindset around governance, policy, procedure, privacy, how we do all of these things. It's always right there, when I'm thinking about how we do things and how, even on simple day-to-day basis, how we share things, right? Should I be sending that, that spreadsheet or that Excel file with people's names and email addresses? Should I be sending that over via email, or should I be sharing that in a more of a secure way? So just all of that just has kind of become ingrained in what we're doing, in what I've been doing. And also I've had some other lenses and some other experiences that have made me think about data governance, privacy, and security in a different way. So I was involved in a cyber breach back in 2015, actually. How time flies, eh? But which made me really start to think about, well, it's really important when data becomes in a context where it's actually impacting people, right? Because there's been a large scale theft of it, right, as well. What should we have done, and what should we be doing in the future to make sure that we are better prepared for that particular scenario to occur again as well. I've also worked on some other data quality projects where it's literally been life and death. In the world of telco, we used to populate something called the Emergency Services Database, which is a register of, here's for every landline, here's the corresponding address. So in the event of someone making a silent 999 call and not being able to talk to the operator will then know exactly where that call has come from as well. And where those addresses are ambiguous or inaccurate, that then becomes a problem. So, and that's something that we worked on many years ago to resolve when I was in the world of telco. So I've really not only seen the evolution of data governance over the last 20 years or so, but also really seen the importance of it just for general society and for humanity as well. It's really, really important that we get these things right, because sometimes the effects can be so consequential, and it can be, well, hey, I've got my personal information out there, and how do I protect myself, all the way through to we need to protect, we have a duty to protect and look after the lives of people, and if something untoward happens to them. So it's really evolved, and it's really, and that's where my passion around it really comes from, because I think it's really important. It's not something that you should do. It's something that we have a duty to do, but it's something that we should do in a way in which it doesn't get in the way, right? I've said this, before, and I'll say it again to my teams. I really think with governance, if governance becomes a hindrance in your organization, you're definitely not doing it in the right way. It should really become an enabler to what we're doing, especially in the modern world of AI, right? As well. So it's very, very important that we set the foundations, but we do it in a way in which it enables and empowers the business, and it's not just something that gets in the way.
I couldn't agree more, actually, Bip. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned AI, and obviously that was the reason I asked you on the podcast, because I loved hearing your talk about AI and data governance a few weeks ago. And I think you're right. Perhaps the reasons and people's understanding of why data governance is important has evolved over time. But I'd be really interested to hear from you about how you think that AI is changing the landscape to data governance. What new challenges and opportunities does it present us?
Sure. So a couple of different perspectives on this. I think, first and foremost, AI and all of the wonderful AI models, all of the large language models that we know about and we use, I'm sure, most of, your listeners have used ChatGPT or a Gemini, or have at least heard of them as well. But those are models that are trained off data, right? And and it's a bit like us as humans, right? We are trained off a bunch of data signals, right? We learn things, we see things, we might listen to podcasts, we might listen to radio, watch TV, and we make our own inferences. And it's very important that the information or the data that we consume is accurate and it's reliable, because if it's not, those judgments and the conclusions that we make are going to be incorrect. And that's the same with AI, right? It's got to be fed very, very good quality data. And that's not just, it's got to be right and it's got to be timely and all of those good things. It's also about things like making sure that there's a balance in, things like, bias, right? There are going to be a spectrum of perspectives on a particular topic as well, but making sure that there's a balanced spectrum of those perspectives, as opposed to an overweightedness on a particular angle of them, is really, really important as well, because otherwise, like us, the machines will then jump to the wrong conclusions and make the wrong judgments, which we'll then use. So it's really, really important that that we feed it really, really good data. So, but secondly, I think there's a whole bunch of opportunities that come, come about it, right? We've been trying to bang the data governance drum in our respective organizations that, for a number of years. But, similar to GDPR and all the various privacy regulations, I find that AI becomes another catalyst to say we should be doing governance and we should be doing it right. So not just so that we are compliant now, it's so we can really get ourselves into and be ready for the for the new AI world as well. So it's another catalyst, but I see a bunch of opportunity, right? Because we've been doing data governance and we're using tools and we're using processes and policies, but there's an exciting way in which we can use AI to help turbocharge some of those initiatives, right? Some of the things that my team have been building and experimenting with is like just at the basic level, automated metadata enrichment. Right. When we're trying to bring things into our catalog, we're trying to bring metadata in and we're trying to describe it, using AI just to say, well, okay, these are address fields, or these are, these are PII and whatnot, it helps us. And it also kind of, it takes some of the pressure away from the human, and it means that we can get things done a little bit more quicker. But I also think, taking things like relating our policies to processes, to people, to outputs as well. There's a whole myriad of opportunities that we have by applying AI as kind of think of it as like having an assistant that's going to be able to understand and read and look for gaps and understand exactly where there are correlations between things as well. I think there's a whole bunch of opportunity in and around that.
Oh, I think that's really interesting. And I think that perhaps the one thing I'd love to pick up on is your automated metadata, perhaps enrichment, because I perhaps have this fear that, people will rely on AI to do everything for them. And I'm sure you've seen the same as me over the years, that a lot of mistakes are made, not because the data is itself poor quality, but they just chose the wrong data. So it was a date field, but not the date that they thought it was. It wasn't, So I'm kind of really intrigued, because one part of me thinks we will always need humans to add the context, but it sounds like perhaps you're trying to choose the things where you can speed up perhaps the boring things which humans don't have to be involved in.
Yeah, there's often this kind of, and it might be a little bit controversial, but this notion of, what's it going to do to people's jobs and how's it going to transform, I just see this as a way of human augmentation, right? And think about, if we look back in history, right, in the early 1900s, right, people, were getting around on horse and carts, right? And then, the automobile was invented, right? Okay, do horse and carts still exist? Yes, they do. Are they used in the same way? Not as much. But, if we fast forward to the advent of technology in our lifetime, right? I'm old enough to be around pre the internet. I remember, in the mid 1990s, using dial-up. I even did a piece of, my dissertation was actually on the impact of e-commerce on the airline industry. And even in the 90s, it was just like, well, people booking holidays on a computer. Not sure if that's going to be a bit of a thing and take over. But we all know what's happened with the revolution of the internet and how that's changed and transformed our lives. From the way in which we shop and buy things to when which we consume information, right? As well. So it's really and all the internet as a case in point, or the advent of the World Wide Web has really changed the way in which we do things and empowered us to do things in more of a better way. Similar to fast forward to the mid noughties and the advent of the smartphone as well. That's done that as well. So it's not really has it wiped out vast amount of jobs and meant, has the internet replaced, no, it really hasn't. Yes, there have been some cases where it does, right? Okay, there's no longer a need for someone to, be kind of driving the horse and carriage, right? We use email, the guy, the people that used to go out and put memos in people's in trays. Okay, so there are going to be some transformations, but, I really do see this as an opportunity for us to revolutionize and transform our ways of working. Some of the things that were very difficult to do then become a lot easier, or some of the things that were quite time consuming, were made a lot quicker to do as well. So I just think this is really around empowering and enabling people to do more with less, which leads to better outcomes. So I don't really see this as machines aren't going to be taken. Machines are there, they're going to be there to help us and enable us to do things that we've never been able to do, or do them, quicker and more expediently.
Excellent. No, I agree with you. I do think we're working in very exciting times, but I think you've just explained very eloquently why perhaps the skills and competencies that you needed to be perhaps a data governance professional 5 years ago are perhaps changing. And I wondered what your thoughts were on, if you're you and I are still data governance professionals, but thinking about your team and perhaps people just starting in the field, what do you think there are the key skills and competencies that our data governance professionals need to be developing now that we're in this age of Gen AI?
Yeah. So I think it's more around awareness and understanding of how things works. And I think it's from two levels, right? So I think, they're always data governance professionals and people just generally working in data need to have a very good level of business acumen, right? As well. It's, and related to the industry or the organization that they're in, right? If your business is selling bananas, right, understand exactly how the business model works, right? How do those bananas get picked? How do you then, what's the logistics process? How do you actually go from, banana, to actually making cash, right? Where are their data touch points, in that process, right? How is that handled, right? Where is that, where is it internally, externally, and whatnot? So having a very, very good grounding of how your business operates and how data flows through that is absolutely key. Now, in the world of AI, you don't need to be that AI expert, right? Everyone seems to think that, and it's very easy to get into a conversation and then be bamboozled by acronyms and buzzwords and terms, right? I think, as long as you have a reasonable level of understanding of the basic principles, what are models, what are, the concepts, right? What are the distinct differences, between them? How do they work, as well? But then also have an understanding of, how and where you could and you can't apply them in the context of your own organization is absolutely key, as well. Things like, how you're dealing with things like, model bias, model training as well. And again, you don't need to have a very deep rooted how does the engine actually work. It's what goes in, what comes out, but really, try to focus on the explainable element of how things actually occur and happen, as well. So that's as far as you need to go. And I think as long as you have a good deep rooted understanding of, from a business point of view, understanding of AI and its concepts, same with data and data science and its concepts, what's NLP, what's machine learning, what's, and all of those things. As long as you have a good, decent enough grasp of what they are, how they're applied, and why you would use them, and what they can let you achieve, I think that puts you in good stead to then understand where there are risks, or where there are sometimes opportunities, where you're applying them, and then also what are the right questions to then ask and frame to our people when you're trying to understand whether things are done in the right or wrong way.
I think that is really great advice, Vip. And it's actually making me think that a training course I ran a few weeks ago, one of the attendees said, look, I'm new to being a data governance manager and my boss is telling me I've got to do SQL training. Do you agree? And I went, do you want to become a coder? And they went, no. And I went, so, and my answer was a bit like you were saying, obviously not about, but I was saying, I did SQL training years and years ago because somebody at the bank recommended it. It turns out I'm not a good coder. But, you don't need to be a coder, but it probably is useful to understand what SQL is and understand the terminology of the people in your organization that do write the SQL queries so that you can talk to them. So I quite often see the data governance role as a translation role. We put different teams in an organization together, and it sounds like you're saying we're probably going to be even more demand for that as AI goes, and that perhaps, so almost like perhaps go and look for a course that introduces you to the the concepts, the overview of AI and Gen AI, not the how to go and build large language models and complex algorithms.
Agree, because when you start to then apply your data governance knowledge, things around things like privacy, security, trust, explainability, and so on, and then you're like, okay, with your newfound understanding of the world of AI and the concepts behind it and how it works, then what are the questions that you need to be answered, in terms of how are we doing this, how are we making sure that our data is safe and secure, how are we making sure that our data is not used for training models that it then puts you in much better stead for asking those questions and having the right level of understanding around it. So you don't need to be the expert. It just kind of just understanding the basic principles of how things work and how they're stitched together as well. But it's not easy because one thing, the world of AI and even data, even when we look at, well, even when I think back over the last 15 years, when people were talking about, dare I say, big data and how that's now evolved, so the world of data is moving along a reasonable pace. The world of AI is moving at a very rapid pace. So it's also important to make sure that you keep abreast of those concepts. Just because you understand things today, tomorrow, your knowledge might be out of date, or it might have some gaps because of the way in which things are moving. So it's important to be curious and inquisitive, right? Sometimes there might be things that you might just be curious about, and it's not really relevant or important, but you've learned something.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant. So we are rapidly running out of time, Vip. So I'm just going to ask you one quick question to end this on. So for any of my listeners that are perhaps working for organizations that are just starting to explore the use of AI, what's the most important piece of advice you would give them?
I'll give a few. I mean, I think I think it's important to democratize, right? So, encourage the use of AI, but with clear, safe guardrails, right? So encourage people to use it, encourage people to experiment, but say, here's how you should use it, but then here's how you should not, right? You can use it, but but it might be, use it, experiment, but don't use it specifically in client work. It might be, use it when you're trying to make your email sound better, or you're trying to summarize a transcript of a meeting, but that's as far, so, have some very, very clear, guardrails around this. The other piece I'll say is, engage with your privacy and legal teams as well, right? Everyone's going on a journey, right? And it's a little bit unknown, as much as it is to them, it is to us as well, because we're trying to figure out what all of this means, and we're trying to understand the risks and how we can approach them. So bring them on the journey with you, so they can understand what you're trying to achieve, the approach that you're trying to take as well. And and I think there will be more understanding of it as well, because this is new territory to them as much as it is to you. And I think the final thing I'll say is, experiment, but don't be afraid to fail, right? One of the most valuable lessons that my team and I have learned is through failure, right? You try something, it doesn't quite work, but then through that process, you figure out a better way of doing it, right? Or, well, actually, you've perhaps gone down the wrong path, right? Embrace failure, and share, talk about the things that you're doing as well, not just internally within your organization, but, across, with your peers and across industry as well.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much, Vip. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that everybody listening will agree you have shared some great advice there. So thank you so much. And I'm sure
Thank
it won't
you.
be long before I have to ask you back again because I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and would love
Me
another
too.
one soon, I'm sure.
Oh, likewise. Thank you so much, Nicola. Pleasure
You're
being on.
welcome. I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Vip as much as I enjoyed speaking to him. And I'm sure we will be having him back before long because I continued the conversation with him long after we stopped recording. He is such a fascinating man to talk to. So I'm sure we will have him back. Now, I hope you will come back and join me next week when I'm going to be talking about how often you should revisit your data governance maturity assessments. They can be a very powerful tool, but only if we do them at the right frequency. So come back next week to find out more.